Matthew chapter 1, verse 5 mentions Ruth in the ancestry of King David, and thereby in the ancestry of Jesus Christ. This is a fascinating piece of history from the life and ancestry of Jesus Christ that I think helps me explain why I left Christianity. So I'm going to try and briefly explain it to you now. Ruth, where I pick up this story, is working in the fields of a stranger to support herself and her mother-in-law. They are living in poverty. They are there. She is there in that situation by choice because she had some sort of realization about God as it was introduced to her through her now deceased husband and his family, that she chose to remain with her mother-in-law despite these hardships. This is how she gets here. I'm going to fast forward to when Boaz, in the evening, when Ruth comes to meet him at the threshing floor, he promises to try to marry her. And in their discussion, he makes some sort of compliment to her about everyone knows her value or that she's a righteous woman. I don't remember the exact phrase. But the next day, he goes and he tries to negotiate her marriage for himself. There is one man who has the right to marry her according to tradition and custom before Boaz does. So this gentleman refuses to marry her because he will lose land rights and the children that he has will be raised up in her deceased former husband's name. These are culturally significant to those people back then. So much so that the gentleman who has the right to marry her first turns down the opportunity. Boaz marries her. Boaz, they make the marriage official, that he is recognized he's going to marry her. So at some point, they're coming back towards the town. I don't know if this is after the marriage or when word spreads that they're going to be married. As they're coming back towards the town or to the people sing her praise by wishing or inviting God or asking God to bless her in the same way that he blessed Rachel and Leah, which were the early maternal ancestors of the Israelite nation. So that, to me, is a very radical form of acceptance. She is a foreigner, and yet they pull her in to their community, their physical and spiritual community, by calling on their own early ancestors at their own early beginnings, at their own early journey into God. They invite her into the nation in that fashion. And as the scripture shows, she turns around and is the maternal ancestor of King David, a Messiah, and then farther down the line into Jesus Christ. So from foreigner, God-realized foreigner, to progenitor of two Messiahs. The point of the story that is significant to me as it relates to Christianity is this. Boaz saw this woman's value, and he was willing to make the socio-economic sacrifice to be with her, because her value outweighed the socio-economic sacrifice. That ushered in a Messiah. This type of pattern is also mirrored in the life of Jesus and Mary, maybe in Joseph to a degree. So, but the point being, Boaz professed the value that he saw in her. And when the opportunity presented itself, he sacrificed socioeconomic benefits to be with this woman of a higher value. So the way that I correlate this to my experiences, when I went to counseling, the gentleman who I had my counseling with, as I started to discuss my concerns and look for answers, as I stated previously, it turns out he had his own unresolved struggles and history. However, he was not willing to risk his social status of being the pastor, of being the counselor, of being the teacher, of just being the man in the relationship. He was not willing to sacrifice his status to show the real value he placed on his wife. It was more important for him to be the pastor, preacher, teacher than it was to be the legitimately engaged husband. That pattern would be repeated over and over and over again. So people, what I noticed was, what I found is men, if myself as a man, if I value my wife, this is where I was at the time, rather than do a church, I felt like it was better for me, and it showed the respect and value I placed on my wife if I were to just A, seek help, B, sit down. And I could not find individuals who were willing to engage in that process or really help me through it. There were several people who I had talked to for help and discussed these issues with. Later on, years later, I'd find out they would get caught in sex scandals, or it turned out they were cheating on their wives. So that was the main problem. Men that I was around, men act like they're covering up their sins or their mistakes. Men act like they're hiding what they really do. That's not true. What we're actually doing is disrespecting the value of the women in our life. That's how I viewed it. So I couldn't get to that place of elevating a woman to her proper value inside of that Christian system, because there were just, everywhere I went, there was no resolution or pattern to gain any understanding or accept responsibility to stop disrespecting women. There were times when men would explain their animalistic behaviors as, I'm just a red-blooded American. That's just what men do. That's not acceptable for the gospel teachings. That's all that's out there right now. But that's why I left, because I was looking for the subtleties. That helped me adjust my behavior. If I don't understand and restrain and respect my own sexual energies, it becomes a disrespect to other people. The woman is not going to receive the optimum benefit of a relationship with me, type stuff.